The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello folks, welcome back to North Norfolk once again. We are back for the last two episodes this week. We've had a nice little sleep in a village called Bacton, haven't we?
Well, yeah, not in the village, in a
room.
Rooms,
yes.
in a accommodation in the village. That makes it sound like we slept on the bench.
We didn't.
No.
Anyway, I might show you the place where we slept in Bacton when I eventually get to that village, but that's not where we are today. Today, we're in a village that used to have a brewery, and it's also a village which has a connection to Admiral Nelson, as we will see when we reach the church. This is Trunch. Trunch, Upland Wood. Today on TVI we hit the village of Trunch, situated 3 miles north of North Walsham and 2 miles from the coast at Munsley in North Norfolk. Trunch is one of the bigger villages within easy reach of the coastline here and has a population to match at just over 900. Nobody can be totally sure of what trunch means, but it's almost certainly to do with a wood of some sort. It first appeared as truck in 1203, whilst the current trunch came about in 1254. An old suggestion is that the name came from Tronchet, a French monastery that owned land in Norfolk. Modern etymologists still can't agree on what it means, but the latest theory suggests it's related to Welsh, a bit odd seeing as we're almost as far away from Wales as is possible here. In any event, this is a beautiful little village and it has some quirky features. Interestingly, Trunch has never had any rail connections, despite the fact that the Norfolk and Suffolk Joint Railway ran close by. There's a rail map outside its pub, because before the 1960s, one could go to the next village along, Knapton, to catch a train to Cromer or North Walsham. And Trunch might be a familiar name to you if you like your English folk music. The fictional village of St Just near Trunch is known in those circles as being the home of the former satirical folk duo, the Kipper family, aka Chris Sugden and Dick Nuds. Let's go to work and put Trunch on the map. Here we have Trunch as it was back in 1900. It was a lot smaller than it is today, and essentially it was all laid out in a linear fashion from east to west along a main street that passed through a central triangle. It's a little more clustered today, given the addition of some modern estates. That said, the core of the place remains the same, and the rest of the parish remains rural and agricultural. Trunch was surrounded on all sides by some good farmland and a few places where other industrial activities, like brickmaking for example, took place. Zooming in a bit, let's see what Trunch had to its name. It was pretty standard stuff for a Norfolk village of the early 1900s, but it's changed so much since. The church in the middle of the central triangle has been the focal point of Trunch for centuries. Everything else has grown up around it. You can see there were two chapels, both on the same road. Neither of those exist now because there's a new one elsewhere, which they were the forerunners of. The new inn is marked on the corner of the central triangle, and on another corner is a second inn. That one's the Crown. Both of those still exist, although the Crown now occupies a different building. The school on the other corner has also gone, but you can still see where it was today. On the beer theme, clearly marked too is Trunch's Brewery. That's also gone now. The eastern sections of the village look more or less the same as this, but the west has transformed into a massive housing estate. This is why Trunch is one of the bigger villages in the Cromer area today. And to prove that, let's see what this looks like in 2025. There you go, you can see a massive difference, can't you? The western side of the village is so much more built up now, whilst the east still looks fairly sporadic. So, how are we going to get ourselves around this one? Well, this is how. We'll start by driving into Trunch from the east, checking out the site of an old Brickworks on the way. Then we'll park here at Primrose Close and start the walk on Chapel Road. We'll follow that to the Central Triangle, where we'll check out what's become of the new inn these days. There's a footpath around the back of that which will take us to Brewery Road. There we'll look at the site of the brewery before cutting back towards the old school, the Crown Inn and the church. From there we'll form a loop around these eastern lanes, taking in the Manor House on the way. To finish with, it'll be a simple case of working our way back to Primrose Close via the new chapel and the playing fields, neither of which existed back in 1900. That shows how much Trunch has developed. Let's get to it. So, if you're driving into Trunch from Mundsley, you will pass the site of the Brickworks, and this is what it looks like now. You do well to know they were made here just by looking at this field, but if you're a good detective, you can make out the extent of them on overhead maps. Bricks were made in Trunch for hundreds of years. Although they are no longer made here, there's still plenty of evidence left. For starters, the lane that passes this site is called Brick Kiln Road. There were actually two kilns here. One of them finished burning in 1910, and the other one stopped working slightly later in 1916. The traditional way of making Trunch bricks was to extract the clay in the autumn or early winter and to temper it in winter or early spring. Then the bricks would be moulded and dried, either by leaving them outside in the summer or firing them in the kilns in the winter. Many of the older cottages in Trunch are made of flints, but bricks were also used extensively, mostly for corners or around windows. Keep your eyes peeled for them as we walk around the village. It's likely that roof and floor tiles and drainage pipes were also made in Trunch too, right here. We start our walk on Chapel Road, a street name that refers to not just one but two religious buildings. One was a primitive Methodist chapel and the other was Wesleyan. Here on the end of the modern Primrose Close is where the latter used to be before it was demolished. Little is known about the Wesleyan chapel, but it ceased to be a religious building in 1937. That's because a new chapel was built on the road to North Walsham, and so it was no longer needed. During World War II, it was used as a base for the Home Guard before eventually being knocked down. Chapel Road now remains as the only physical clue to its once existence because there are no obvious remains of it. It's now been completely built over by 20th century housing. Let's follow this for a short way into the middle of Trunch. You don't need to go far to find the other chapel. This one though is very much still standing. Here we have the old primitive Methodist chapel, and there's some debate as to when this was built. Some sources claim 1852 or 1859, but there's also a theory that dates it back to 1807. Here's why. In 1907, the chapel is known to have celebrated a centenary, which would suggest it was built 100 years beforehand, right? Well, possibly. It could also have been a celebration of 100 years of the movement in Trunch, and not the actual building. In any event, this too closed in 1937. Until 2014, a very, very long time since it last hosted a religious service, this was a vehicle repair garage. That has since moved to new premises, but the chapel still remains. Today, this is a private house, having been converted to residential accommodation. Have you found the village sign?
Maybe.
These Norfolk villages have these wonderful village signs, don't we? Yeah. And this one here in Trunch is absolutely no exception. If I just tilt the camera up, because you can't see it here. Look at this. That's beautiful, that, isn't it? Fantastic. And this is right next to the church, and this bungalow here, which we're going to talk about in a moment, but it's also next to this building. Now, what do you think that was?
Looks pretty pub-like to me.
Correct. In the middle of the village now, you're looking at what used to be its beating heart. This used to be a pub called the New Inn, although more recently it was Trunch Corner Shop. It closed in 2022 following the retirement of the owners. Let's discuss this magnificent building in a little more detail. As far as surnames in Trunch go, Primrose is a really important one. That's why there's a Primrose Close off Chapel Road. The family built many of Trunch's important structures, including this old pub. It was built in 1837 by William Primrose. It was originally single-storey and thatched too. It was first owned by Philip Primrose and then by Stewart and Patterson at some point in or just after 1903. As a pub, it lasted until 1961. Shortly after that, though, it was closed for good. Before it became a general store, it was a fish and chip shop throughout the 1970s. That was run by a Mrs. Pendred and her son Roger. Today, Trunch is without a shop at all, be it serving chips or general goods. In the past, the villagers had several shops, mostly near the church. There was a post office in Church Street too, which was only recently converted into a house. Now, the little building next to the old pub is an interesting one. It's called Bingalow Back, and if you look on Google Maps, you'll see a marker that points to this house simply entitled Trunch Concerts. You'll often see some posters on the walls outside this listing the same thing. So, what are they? Well, Trunch Concerts are exactly what they sound like. They are performances, usually held in the church. They were started in 1997 by a cellist and conductor called Roy Abrams. He retired to Trunch having been a professional musician and a teacher. Seldom, though, will a retired musician give up playing for good. He therefore sought the opportunity to work with the local community to promote a series of concerts, and to do that he even put his own grand piano in the church. From those small beginnings, Trunch Concerts performed regularly, 3 times a year in fact. The project would then change from friends playing music into a way to raise money for the conservation and restoration of the church fabric, which became a crisis when the quinquennial inspection of 2001 revealed 2 very large and growing cracks in the tower. Since 1998, the concerts have raised over £27,000 towards restoration projects. All concert proceeds continue to be donated to the church to this day. Meanwhile, the concerts themselves have attracted some big-name professional performers, a list that's far too long to go into detail with. So one thing Nikki's noticed about this place already is how quiet it is, haven't you? Shh. I'm not loud. Yet again, the clue is in the name here. On Brewery Road, there was indeed one of them. Simply named the Norfolk Brewery, it was started by William Primrose in 1805. It was later run by his son Philip. When William died, he left it to Philip together with the malt house and its associated pubs. Some of the early brewers who worked in Trunch were Samuel Hole, William Ames, Philip Primrose, and Betsy Primrose, who was Philip's widow. According to the Electoral Register, Willoughby Churchill owned the brewery from 1907 until at least 1915. Trunch's brewery was a pioneer in the production of canned beers. It had its own bottling plant that was built in the 1920s, and by 1939 it also had its own social club. The brewery itself has now gone. It was demolished in 1952 and there's nothing left these days. Well, apart from one building, this is Brewery House. It was built in 1837 for the owner. In 1839, that was William Primrose, but it was lived in by a tenant, namely the Reverend Robert Marler Kramer. It remains a private house today, and the biggest clue to Trunch's beer-related history. So, as we learned there, the brewery had its own social club in the mid-19th century. Trunch still has one of those, but this isn't the original building. It sits on the edge of the brewery site though. Trunch Social Club is an important venue in this village. 2 beer festivals are held here every year, usually at the end of May and on the August bank holiday. It's often used for things like wedding receptions and funeral wakes. On its Facebook page, it has a simple description. It calls itself a great place where friends are made. And next to the social club, there's a little bus shelter with a plaque in it. Behind my head there, it says, presented to the village of Trunch by C.R. Wade, builder, 1969. And Nikki is checking out a little notice board, which is on the side of this bus shelter. Anything of note on there, my dear?
You look like someone I'm eating a biscuit.
Hey, it's all for the fans.
Anything? Biscuits.
What?
I've got fans of biscuits too.
I don't know. What kind of biscuit is it?
Butterscotch crunch. Anyway.
How very?
This is a little bit about Trunch, about the history and about what to see in the history, historical buildings and some walking routes.
Plenty of those.
I'll eat my biscuit now.
Okay. Next to see is the site of Trunch's old school. Sketchy records and educated guesswork tell us that there was a school in Trunch as early as 1646. Evidently, it was held in the chancel of the church until 1750, and holes can still be seen in the choir stalls today that could well have been inkwells. Later, there's thought to have been a school in Brewery Road. Records state a man named John Lacey was a schoolmaster in Trunch from 1806 to 1817, and later there was another schoolmaster called Timothy Flint, who lived in the village between 1833 and 1836. All that predates the National School, which stood here. It was built in 1852 on the corner of Back Street and Gimmingham Road. It had 2 rooms and separate entrances for boys and girls. Its playground was across the road, and it had room for 72 children in total. As we learned though yesterday, Trunch was a very oversubscribed school. It often took up to 90 children, and any more were sent to Gimmingham. It must have been really popular, so it's a little strange that it closed so soon in 1933. But close it did, and all the children moved to Munsley. It became a men's club before the site for a grain dryer. In 1970, it was then bought in a derelict state by Arthur Amis, who lived in this, the schoolhouse, next door. The school itself stood where the garden of the house is today, and this wall is all that remains structure-wise. Okay, I've caught up with Nikki, who went off to the church while I was dealing with the school there. So, have you found anything in here of any note?
Well, I've just been sat here just enjoying the peacefulness of it, really. You know, people often ask me, why do I, like cemeteries and stuff. There's some of the most peaceful places on the planet. I'm not even joking. I mean, everybody's just so quiet. It's full of people, but it's just quiet, and it's just so nice.
Well,
and I can sit here and I can hear the sounds of nature, and I can, sometimes we see squirrels or rabbits or, whatever, and it's just nice.
Just nice.
Yeah.
That's going to be the word of the day, isn't it? Nice.
Maybe.
Nice. It's nice. Trunch's church is the Grade 1 listed 14th century St. Botolph's. This is famous for its carved and painted wood font canopy, featuring panels with paintings of the 12 apostles, a cornice with a Latin inscription, and 6 arches filled with tracery. Only 4 such canopies still exist in England. St Botolph's also features a hammer beam roof with carved angels, as well as medieval misericords under the seats in the chancel. Another medieval survival is the rood screen depicting 11 disciples and St Paul, although their faces were scratched out during the Reformation. The church is the oldest building in Trunch, but it's definitely younger than what stood here in Saxon times. There are some fragments of stone in the walls which are believed to have been reused from an earlier Saxon church, the same one that was recorded in the Domesday Book. St Botolph's used to have ringing bells. In 1899 there were 3, one made by Edward Piggin and Thomas Newman in 1707, another by Thomas Newman in 1710, and one by John Stevens in 1719. There was a 4th, but it was sold in 1863 because it was cracked. That one dated from 1440. In 1717, the bells were supposed to have been rung to celebrate the acquittal of the Earl of Oxford, who was charged with conspiracy. He'd been accused of colluding with the French to put the Pretender on the throne, but Trunch's parson forbade the ringing as he supported the crown. Trunch has a connection to Admiral Lord Nelson, who we know from our previous adventures was an active figure in Norfolk. His illegitimate daughter, Horatia, lived in Trunch and was married to a former village boy. Indeed, inside this church, one of the memorials mentions her. Her wedding was to a reverend named Philip Ward, who was born in Trunch on the 1st of September 1795. His father was Marmaduke Ward, who was the parish clerk for many years. The couple lived in Trunch Hall, on the road to Bradfield. They were not married in this church. That's an urban myth which often gets sensationalised out here. Philip and Horatia married on February the 19th, 1822, but the service was conducted in Burnham Westgate Church, not here in Trunch. After Philip's death, Horatia moved to Pinner to be near her son, also named Nelson. That's where her grave is too. So Horatia is not actually buried in Trunch, but her name was added to the Ward Memorial you can find here after her death. Nelson isn't the only famous man this church shares links with. In 1589, Robert Thexton became the rector of Trunch. Whilst he was at Corpus Christi College in Cambridge, he was the roommate of Christopher Marlowe, the famous and infamous Elizabethan playwright. Behind the church is the Crown Inn, which has been here since 1953. However, it's known for sure there was a tavern of some description here in the 16th century. The manorial records of Gimmingham tell us it had massive walls and heavy oak rafters. The first recorded licensee of the Crown was John Norton in 1745, and he sold it in 1819 to Thomas Wells of Worstead. Nothing is mentioned then until 1836, when Joseph Newland was the licensee. He was followed by a huge succession of landlords and landladies. Let's run through the surnames of every single landlord since 1836 in order. They are Newland, Bullymore, Gall, Yaxley, Self, Reynolds, Baker, Humphrey, Cobb, Dixon, Bignell, Willis, Adams, Barnard, Cudmore, Lomax, Wakeham, Whittaker and Madam. The building that stands here now is not the one that John Norton knew. It was originally a pretty thatched number, and it would still be here today had it not been damaged in a fire in 1941. Trading did continue though, with a flat roof instead of a new thatched one. Between 1941 and 1953, this temporary drinking establishment was called the Half Crown. It was eventually demolished and replaced by this building. When Trunch's shop closed, this pub sold the village's newspapers until 2024. It's proper Norfolk where the Crown is situated here, because there's a junction, a big junction, huge, where a load of little lanes all meet each other. I'm sure you remember Choseley from the last time I was here in Norfolk and how we saw something similar out there. Well, it's just the same here in Trunch. Okay, so next up is to head this way. Now it's a straight walk down Munsley Road, which is a lot more sparsely populated than what we've seen so far. Mind you, this eastern section of Trunch still has a lot to talk about. For a start, we're about to pass the allotments, and that'll please a certain section of my viewership. Gunthorpe Road next, and there's only one thing of note on here. That would be the gorgeous late 16th or early 17th century manor house. This is thatched and still has its original octagonal chimneys and brick mullioned windows. Now, don't mix this up with the other manor house in Trunch. That's right, there are two, so it is a little confusing. To combat that, this old manor house is sometimes referred to as Hall Farm. The other one is on Brewery Road, and have a guess who it was once owned by. Yep, that's right, William Primrose. Later, one of its more notable residents was Alexander Clark. He and his wife Nancy were passengers on the Oriana, the famous cruise liner that sailed from Southampton to Australia in 1960. In doing so, it became the first ocean liner to berth at the Fremantle passenger terminal. Around the corner onto Knapton Road, and next we have the cemetery. The locals still to this day refer to this as the New Cemetery, despite the fact it was opened in 1936. It was opened after the churchyard at St Botolph's became full, and it's sited next to the old rectory. The lit gate here was a gift from a Mrs. Lamb who lived in the village. Most of the gravestones in here are legible, with just a handful that are too worn or too overgrown. Linked below is a list of all the known people who are buried in here. Well worth a look for all you genealogists. Are you wanting a little look round in here?
I had a sit in the cemetery earlier, I'm good.
Are you sure?
Yeah, these are more modern ones. The older historical graves have so much more to see on them. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not sort of disparaging this in any way, shape or form, but you know, this, to be honest with you, could be a graveyard, cemetery, anywhere. I like the old memorials. We used to do things differently in the Victorian times.
Just a bit.
Yeah.
Now we come to the village hall. This was built in 1912 on a piece of former glebe land that the church had sold to the village. There was some controversy about the ownership after World War I, but that was eventually resolved and it was settled as village property. Arthur Amis, Wally Hicks and Arthur May then bought an extra piece of land for a car park. In 1973 the hall was modernised and it was officially reopened by the MP Ralph Howell. That's the way it stayed until 2019, when there was a major fundraising effort to modernise its kitchen. So, as we learned earlier, there were two former Methodist chapels in Trunch, and they both closed in the same year. With the Primitives and the Wesleyans unified by that date, they needed a new home, and this is that very building. This brand new chapel was built in 1937 at a cost of £1,707. Trunch's local residents helped with that cost, and within a few months they had all the money needed for the site. Speaking of which, the site for this building was given by Mr. R.W. Farman of North Walsham, who was the landowner at the time. Made of red brick and a tiled roof, this is actually two buildings, a chapel and a hall. Much larger than the original buildings on Chapel Road, the hall could accommodate 110, whilst the chapel itself could hold 100. Right, we've just got the playing field left, and we just spotted this path which links you to the playing field close to the Methodist church. I thought I was going to have to go all the way around onto another road to get to this, but apparently this is a shortcut. Happy days. Between here and the end it's mostly houses, but there is a small playing field in the southernmost reaches. I didn't find out a lot about this, but it's a nice way to end the walk. From here you can easily get back to Chapel Road using a path into the housing bordering it to the north. Do you know, you're a big kid.
Yeah, I mean, I might be 50, but I still like to go on a swing. A swing. I know what you're thinking.
That's Trunch done with, so we have one more to visit this week before we end this little trip. In the last one this week, we'll be visiting a village that's split into two parts. Between them, there's a back lane which has two memorials on it, and we'll be discussing the tragic story behind one of them. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.